There comes a moment in your life when you stand in front of the mirror not to fix your hair or admire your reflection, but to finally see you, raw, unfiltered, unapologetically you. And that moment is terrifying, but it's also the beginning of everything. Because when you finally choose yourself above all else, the world doesn't fall apart. It finally starts to make sense. Asterisk, you are not born to live as a watered-down version of yourself. Yet for years, maybe decades, you've been pouring your energy into people who never saw your soul, bending to expectations that suffocated your spirit. You said yes when you meant no. You smiled when you were dying inside. But choosing yourself means walking away from that psychological prison. Let's be honest, choosing yourself isn't easy. It's not some feel-good mantra. It's a war against every belief you inherited from a world that taught you to play small. And when you finally say, enough, you will feel the ground shake beneath your feet. You'll lose people. You'll outgrow places. And yes, you'll face your shadow. But here's the truth. Asterisk, you have spent years, perhaps your whole life, waiting for the moment when someone would finally see you. Truly see you. You hoped they would notice the way you always showed up, the way you made sacrifices, the way you silenced your needs to keep the peace. You thought that if you gave enough, loved enough, bent enough, eventually, the world would return the favor. But it never did, and now you're standing at a crossroad, exhausted and disillusioned, wondering what went wrong. This is where the real journey begins, not into the world, but inward, into the depths of your own psyche. Because the liberation you seek will never come from the outside. It begins the moment you finally choose yourself. To choose yourself is not an act of arrogance. It is not selfishness. It is the deepest form of responsibility one can assume to honor the self that has long been buried under layers of conditioning. We are not born to betray ourselves, but we are taught to. From early childhood, we are subtly and overtly rewarded for compliance, for pleasing others, for ignoring our internal compass in favor of external rewards. Over time, the authentic self becomes a stranger. We begin to identify more with who we think we should be than with who we truly are. And yet, the soul never forgets. It waits patiently, often silently, in the dark corners of your being, calling out in the form of anxiety, restlessness, emotional exhaustion, trying to remind you of what was lost. Choosing yourself is a radical return to that forgotten center. It is an act of reclaiming not only your preferences, your boundaries, your truth, but your very essence. And that reclamation does not happen in a burst of inspiration. It is forged in the fires of psychological awakening. It begins when you finally tire of the masks, when the performance of your life becomes too heavy to bear. In that moment, there is a choice. Continue pretending, or turn inward and confront what has long been abandoned. The psychological liberation that comes from choosing yourself cannot be measured in external success. It is not about becoming richer or more admired. It is about feeling the tectonic shift inside your psyche when your self-worth is no longer dependent on approval, applause, or acceptance. When you choose yourself, you are no longer a puppet of social expectation. You become sovereign. You begin to listen to your inner voice, not the one shaped by fear or trauma, but the one that whispers through intuition, through dreams, through sudden knowing. But let us not romanticize this process. Liberation is never without pain. When you choose yourself, you will confront guilt, the guilt of saying no, the guilt of disappointing others, the guilt of walking away from roles you played so well they became part of your identity. You will feel grief, too, for the years you lost, for the love you gave away so freely, for the self that had to be hidden to survive. Yet within this pain lies your awakening, because true healing does not come from avoiding discomfort, but by walking straight into it with open eyes and a courageous heart. This choice to stand for yourself is a declaration that you are no longer willing to be an afterthought in your own life. It is to say, I am no longer available for one-sided relationships. I am no longer betraying my own needs just to be liked. I will not contort myself into something more palatable for others. And when you begin to live this truth, something extraordinary happens. Your nervous system begins to settle. The anxiety that once haunted you begins to dissipate. Why? Because your soul is no longer at war with your actions. There is alignment. There is integrity. You are finally walking in the direction of your own truth. Psychologically, this is the essence of individuation, the process by which a person becomes a true individual. It is not about isolation or egoism. It is about integration. To choose yourself is to integrate the fragmented parts of you that have long been exiled. The angry child, the silent artist, the fearless woman, the dreamer, the rebel, the truth teller. These parts are not your enemies. They are the missing pieces of your wholeness. And only by choosing yourself do you create the safety and space for them to return. When you stop outsourcing your worth, the world will resist. People who benefited from your self-betrayal will question your change. They may label you as selfish, difficult, even cold. But understand this. Their resistance is not a reflection of your failure. It is a measure of how much they depended on your silence. Your awakening will unsettle those who preferred the version of you that played small. Let it. Do not shrink to reassure others. Your self-commitment will either inspire people to rise with you or reveal who was never meant to walk this journey beside you. And here is the paradox. The more you choose yourself, the more deeply connected you become to the world, not through codependency or performance, but through authentic presence. You no longer give out of obligation, but from overflow. You no longer lose yourself in others, you meet them from a place of inner fullness. Your relationships become clearer, deeper, more honest. Your decisions become guided not by fear, but by a quiet knowing. You begin to trust yourself, perhaps for the first time in your life, and that trust becomes the foundation of your rebirth. Choosing yourself is not a one-time act. It is a daily practice. It is looking in the mirror every morning and asking, what do I need today? It is listening to the answer even when it's inconvenient. It is saying yes to your own voice, even when the world demands silence. It is walking away from situations that drain your spirit, even when they are familiar. It is showing up for yourself in the smallest ways, getting rest, speaking truth, protecting your peace. Over time, these choices accumulate, and the architecture of your life begins to change. No longer built on the shaky ground of people-pleasing, your life becomes rooted in self-respect and clarity. There is something sacred about watching yourself come home, about witnessing your own return, not the person who was shaped by society, but the one who existed before the world told you who to be. That self, the wild, wise, intuitive self, has been waiting, not judging, not condemning, just waiting. And when you finally arrive, when you finally choose them, they do not scold you for the delay. They embrace you like an old friend, as if to say, finally, you remembered. This is not the end of your journey. It is the beginning of a life that is truly yours. A life where every decision flows from alignment. A life where peace is not just a concept but a felt experience in your body. A life where you do not merely exist but live, love, and lead from your whole liberated self. Asterisk, there is a part of you you've tried to forget. A presence that lingers in the background of your life, shadowy and persistent, showing up in the most inconvenient of ways, in the anger you pretend not to feel, in the envy you deny, in the fear that haunts your decisions, and in the strange moments when you sabotage the very things you claim to desire. This presence, though unwelcome, is not your enemy. It is your shadow, the hidden counterpart of your conscious identity. And until you have the courage to face it, to truly look into its depths without judgment or shame, you will never be whole. For the truth is, your freedom, your strength, your authentic power does not lie in perfection, it lies in integration. You were taught to be good, to behave, to smile when things hurt, to stay quiet when your soul screamed. You learned that some feelings were unacceptable, some desires too dangerous to speak out loud, and so you buried them, not because you were weak, but because you were human, because the world around you demanded it. The cost of belonging seemed to be the abandonment of your full self. But everything you suppress does not disappear, simply retreats into the unconscious, waiting for a moment to emerge. The shadow does not vanish. It waits, it watches, it remembers. We like to think of ourselves as whole, as conscious, as in control. But so much of who we are remains unseen by the very person who should know us best, ourselves. And this is the tragedy of the unexamined life, that we mistake the mask for the face. We believe we are only the parts we present to the world, kind one, the strong one, the selfless one. But there is more. There is rage in you. There is lust. There is jealousy. There is grief that never found a voice, and pain that shaped you in silence. These are not flaws, they are aspects of the total self. And only when you turn toward them with compassion do you begin to reclaim your power. Power does not come from denying the dark. It comes from walking into it with courage and curiosity. The shadow holds the key to your wholeness because it contains the parts of you you've disowned. It is the forgotten creative, the silenced truth teller, the hidden warrior. What you call flaws may, in fact, be strengths distorted by repression. The anger you fear may be a signal that your boundaries have been violated. The envy you hide may point to unclaimed desires. The sadness you suppress may be the wisdom of your body grieving something real. Nothing in the shadow is inherently evil. It is simply unconscious. It is raw, undigested life waiting to be acknowledged. And when you finally stop running, when you sit with your shadow instead of avoiding it, something shifts. You begin to understand that those dark feelings are not out to destroy you. They are trying to show you where you've been wounded. They are maps, not monsters. They carry information, but they will only speak if you are willing to listen without judgment. And that listening, that presence with yourself is the alchemy that transforms shadow into gold. In every myth, the hero must descend. There is always a journey into the underworld, a confrontation with darkness. This is not just story, it is psychology. It is your life. Your underworld may be a past trauma, a belief you inherited from childhood, a part of yourself you've spent years disowning. And like all true journeys, it cannot be skipped or bypassed. It must be walked. But this descent is not a failure, it is a rite of passage. It is a sacred task of meeting yourself fully, not as you wish to be, but as you are. Most people avoid this path. They spend their lives polishing their image, numbing their discomfort, projecting their pain onto others. It is easier to blame, to distract, to spiritualize suffering instead of feeling it. But in doing so, they give away their power. For there is no power in pretense. Power is born from truth, and truth includes all of you. To own your shadow is to no longer fear what lies beneath. It is to walk through the darkness of your psyche and come out with something real: understanding, clarity, resilience, depth. This journey is not linear. There will be days when you feel lost, confused, ashamed, when old patterns resurface, and you wonder if anything has truly changed. But do not let this discourage you. The psyche does not heal in straight lines. It spirals, it circles, it deepens. Each time you revisit an old wound, you do so with new eyes, with more capacity to hold what once overwhelmed you. This is growth, not the kind that's visible to others, but the kind that changes your very foundation. It is slow, quiet, and often painful, but it is sacred. And as you face your shadow, something miraculous begins to happen. You start to feel more alive, not just happier, but more real. Your emotions become clearer, your boundaries stronger, your creativity richer. Relationships shift because you are no longer acting from wounds, you are acting from awareness. You begin to trust yourself, not just the light parts, but the whole of you. And with that trust comes a deep sense of peace, because you are no longer divided within. The integration of the shadow is the birth of inner authority. You stop seeking permission to exist. You stop needing others to validate your worth. You know who you are because you've met yourself in the dark. You've seen what you're capable of, not just the kindness and the love, but the strength to hold pain, to sit with discomfort, to not run when things get hard. That kind of strength cannot be faked. It is earned in the moments when you choose truth over illusion, depth over distraction, soul over survival. There is no final destination in this work. You do not arrive at a place of perfect balance. What you gain is not a fixed state, but a relationship with yourself that is rooted in honesty and acceptance. You learn to navigate your inner world with wisdom. You make room for contradiction, for complexity, for mystery. You stop demanding that life or your emotions fit into neat categories. You learn to live with paradox, to be both strong and vulnerable, to feel both fear and courage, to carry both wounds and wisdom. This is what happens when you choose to face your shadow. You become whole, not perfect, not always peaceful, but whole. And in that wholeness, you find something more powerful than happiness. You find meaning, you find depth, you find the self. You lost somewhere along the way, the one who was never gone, only hidden, waiting for you to remember. There is a quiet death that takes place in the soul of a person who lives for the approval of others. It is not sudden and it rarely draws attention, but it is real. It begins with small concessions, the times you laughed when something pierced you inside, the moments you said yes while your body screamed no, the countless ways you reshaped yourself to fit the expectations of others. And while the world may have applauded you for being agreeable, reliable, and accommodating, inside you began to vanish. Bit by bit, you disappeared behind the mask of who you thought you had to be, in order to be loved, accepted, safe. But what happens when you finally stop looking outside yourself for permission to exist? What awakens when you begin to live not as a reflection of others' desires, but as the true embodiment of your own truth? That is where life begins, not the performance, not the survival, but life in its raw, untamed, and beautiful authenticity. To understand this fully, we must first realize that the need for approval is not merely a personality trait, it is a deeply rooted psychological mechanism, born from a primal need to belong. From childhood, we are conditioned to associate approval with safety. A frown from a parent, the withdrawal of affection, the subtle punishment of being ignored. These taught us that to be loved, we must behave, we must adapt, adjust, conform, and so we learn to scan the emotional temperature of a room, to anticipate the needs of others, to play the role that earned us acceptance. In doing so, we abandoned ourselves, not out of weakness, but as a means of survival. But the cost of this adaptation is steep. When your identity is shaped by the approval of others, you are always one step removed from yourself. You learn to read faces more than you read your own heart. You become attuned to others' expectations but estranged from your own needs. And this disconnection breeds anxiety, resentment, confusion. You feel empty, not because you are unworthy, but because you are absent from your own life. The world sees you but you don't see yourself. And here lies the great paradox. The more you seek approval, the more distant you become from the very thing that makes you worthy or authenticity. Approval is conditional. It is fragile. It is based on who others want you to be, not who you are. And as long as you are trying to win someone else's love, you will betray your own. That betrayal may look like overcommitting, staying silent, avoiding conflict, shrinking your truth, or tolerating relationships that drain you. It is death by 1,000 compromises, but something changes the day you stop chasing approval. There may be no grand revelation, no dramatic moment. Sometimes, it comes as a quiet exhaustion the moment you realize you simply cannot continue living someone else's life. And in that moment, something deeper stirs. Not rebellion, but remembrance. A distant voice within you, long silenced, begins to whisper again, "This is not who you are." When you begin to listen to that voice, you awaken to a new kind of power, not the loud, external kind, but the inner authority that comes from self-recognition. You stop asking others to define you. You stop measuring your worth by how comfortable you make others feel. You stop twisting yourself into forms that win you praise but cost you your peace. You become real. And in becoming real, you reclaim your freedom. This freedom is not about defiance. It is not a reactive stance against the world. It is the grounded, a sacred act of aligning with your own soul. It is the moment you begin to say what you truly feel, not what you think people want to hear. It is honoring your intuition, even when logic protests. It is walking away from situations that no longer resonate with your spirit, not because they are bad, but because they no longer hold truth for you. And that is perhaps the most terrifying and liberating thing of all, learning to live without needing to be understood. You will lose people when you stop seeking approval. Those who loved the mask may not love the face beneath it. Those who are comfortable with your compliance may resist your clarity. But what you gain is beyond measure. You gain yourself. And in gaining yourself, you make space for relationships rooted in truth, not performance. You find that the people who resonate with your realness may be fewer, but they are deeper, more nourishing, more aligned. You begin to belong not everywhere, but where it matters. The psychological transformation that occurs when you release the grip of approval is profound. You begin to feel your emotions more vividly because you are no longer censoring them. You access desires that had been buried under layers of obligation. Your voice, once timid or overly careful, grows in strength and clarity. You no longer fear being misunderstood, because your worth is no longer tied to being liked. You begin to live for what feels true, not for what appears right. This is the path of individuation, not becoming better or more acceptable, but becoming whole. To be whole is to carry contradictions without shame, to be both soft and strong, joyful and grieving, light and dark. It is to know that you are not a fixed identity, but a living, evolving soul. And only by stepping away from external validation do you begin to explore this inner landscape. To stop seeking approval is to step into the unknown. There are no guaranteed outcomes. There is no one to tell you who to be. But in that unknown, you will find a new compass, one guided by intuition, integrity, and presence. You will discover that your truth may not be universal, but it is sacred. And by honoring it, you give others permission to do the same. Become a mirror, not of perfection, but of authenticity. It takes immense courage to break the habit of approval. It requires grieving the persona you spent years building. It asks you to sit with the discomfort of being misunderstood. But every time you choose truth over applause, you strengthen your spirit. You come closer to your essence. You begin to inhabit your own life in a way that is grounded, embodied, and free. And freedom, in this sense, is not about doing whatever you want. It is about being fully yourself, unmasked, unfiltered, and unafraid to be seen as you truly are. It is the kind of freedom that brings peace to your nervous system, clarity to your decisions, and depth to your relationships. It is a freedom that cannot be given or taken away, because it was never dependent on anyone else to begin with. There comes a time in every soul's journey when the outer world begins to lose its grip. The noise, the demands, the endless striving, it all starts to feel strangely hollow. You might still be doing all the things you were taught to do, perhaps even succeeding by the world's standards, but something inside you is restless. Something aches not from what's missing in your circumstances, but from what's been long missing in your connection to yourself. It is in this quiet discontent that the first whispers of rebirth begin to stir. Not a rebirth of personality or image, but of the soul. It is the slow, sacred awakening of your truest self after years, perhaps decades of forgetting. To choose yourself in a world that constantly demands your abandonment is nothing short of a spiritual act. It is not about indulgence or ego. It is about realignment. It is about turning inward and listening to the faint but persistent voice that says, there is more to you than what you've been living. And once you hear that voice, even faintly, you can no longer go back to sleep. The illusion begins to crumble. What once felt stable now feels suffocating. What once held meaning now feels like a performance. And while this unraveling can be terrifying, it is also the beginning of truth. The path of spiritual and emotional rebirth does not announce itself with fireworks. It often arrives in the form of confusion, isolation, fatigue. These symptoms are not signs that something is going wrong. On the contrary, they are the indicators that the false self is losing its hold. You begin to shed roles you once clung to for safety: the caretaker, the overachiever, the martyr, the peacekeeper. These identities may have won you love or approval, but they were never truly you. They were strategies, brilliant, adaptive, and necessary once, but they are no longer sustainable. The cost of maintaining them has become too great. Rebirth, in its essence, requires death not of the body, but of illusion. It demands that you let die the parts of you that were never real to begin with. This death is not tragic, it is holy. The grief you feel as you let go is not weakness. It is the soul honoring what it carried for too long. And as you mourn the old self, you create space for something deeper to emerge, something raw, quiet, unshakable. It is not something you invent or improve, it is something you remember. The true self does not need building, it only needs revealing. This process is rarely linear, it comes in waves. There will be moments when you feel profoundly alive, connected, clear, and then, without warning, you may feel lost again, consumed by old patterns or fears. But this is not regression, it is the spiral nature of healing. Each return to the darkness is not a failure, but a deeper descent into truth. You are not moving backward, you are being invited to face what you were once too afraid to feel. Each layer brings you closer to your core. At the heart of this transformation is presence. You learn to sit with yourself without judgment. You stop abandoning yourself in moments of discomfort. You begin to listen not to the conditioned voice that says you must earn your worth, but to the quiet knowing that you are always enough, even in your brokenness. This self-intimacy is the soil in which rebirth takes root. It is not flashy. It is often invisible to the outside world, but inside, everything changes. The war within you begins to quiet. The shame begins to dissolve, and what rises in its place is a quiet strength, a trust in life that is no longer theoretical, it is felt. You begin to notice the subtle ways life speaks to you again, the way a moment of silence feels like nourishment, the way your body relaxes when you tell the truth, the way certain people no longer fit into your life, not because they are bad, but because you are no longer willing to betray yourself to belong. This sensitivity is not fragility, is clarity. You are no longer numbing your soul to survive. You are choosing to feel, to honor, to walk in alignment with what is real. Choosing yourself in this way changes your entire relationship with the world. You no longer move from fear, but from integrity. You are no longer seduced by shiny promises or external markers of success. Your compass becomes internal. You begin to value peace over performance, depth over distraction, truth over image. This does not make life easier, but it makes it meaningful. And in that meaning, there is a fullness that success alone can never provide. Spiritual rebirth does not mean you become someone else. It means you return to who you were before the world told you who to be. It is the peeling away of layers until only essence remains. This essence is not loud or performative. It does not need validation, it simply is. And when you live from this place, life begins to reorganize around you. Not because you are forcing change, but because you are finally aligned with the deeper current of your own being. There will be losses along the way of people, places, patterns. Let them go. Do not cling to what no longer mirrors your truth. You are not here to maintain the comfort of others at the expense of your own awakening. Your life is too sacred for that. You will lose false safety, yes, but you will gain something greater, freedom. Not the kind that comes from escaping responsibility, but the kind that comes from finally being responsible to your soul. And with this freedom comes a profound sense of homecoming, not to a place or a person, but to yourself. You no longer seek salvation in others. You no longer need to be saved, because you realize you were never broken, only buried. The light you were chasing was always inside you. And now, having walked through the fire, through the disillusionment, through the letting go, you emerge not perfect, but whole, not without scars, but without shame, not above life, but rooted deeply in it. This is the quiet power of choosing yourself. It is the invisible revolution that changes everything. The world may not notice at first, but you will. Your body will, your heart will, and life will respond. Because when you rise in alignment with your true self, the universe does not remain silent. It begins to move with you, not because you demanded it, but because you finally remembered the ancient truth. You and life are not separate. You were never meant to live as a stranger to your own soul. You were meant to burn, to break, to awaken, and to rise. So if you are standing at the edge of yourself today, tired of being who they expect you to be, ready to remember who you truly are, this is your sign. Don't wait for permission. Don't wait for applause. Choose yourself. Choose your healing. Choose your voice. Choose your power. Choose the real you. Because the day you choose yourself is the day the universe finally has something real to respond to. Now it's your turn. Drop a comment and tell us, what's one part of yourself you're reclaiming today? Like, share, and subscribe for more soul awakening content like this.